Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The U.S. Department of State Office of Art and Embassies, the Aspen Institute, the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, and the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center are pleased to present A Conversation with the Honorees, featuring moderator Glenn Lowry, Director of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Our opening act this evening is poet and performer Marc Bamuthi Joseph.
Hi, you can applaud. It's all good. I know we're in a hallowed environment and everything, but we're also, I think, celebrating a vessel for reciprocity that demands that you do as much work as I do, okay? Yes? Cool, great. So it'll work if you do stuff like applaud and giggle. Cool. Love it! Cool. Our ancestors hacked bitterly at sugarcane. We are the sweet, never tasted by their sweat-soaked tongues. They begged for us to be here, never knowing who or what we'd become. We are their echoing elegy, perpetually sung. We are their echoing elegy. I was in Haiti once at this Vodun ceremony, and I passed out. Personally, I think I seen a little bit of blood, and I just, like a little Beyonce. But the people that I was with, folks who all honor and respect Haitian culture, believe that I'd been possessed. They said I fell like this. A pawn or a priest. Either is possible. Who knows where your body goes when the spirit flies away? When you lose your mind, what jumps in to take its place? The Haitians called me Negine. My grand-mère, my oldest living relative, once told me that Guinée is the tunnel that connects Haiti to Africa. So when a Haitian calls you Negine, that's the real shit. That's like super black. It's true. It's like a stripe. I wonder what they'd say if they knew my kid was half Chinese and my girlfriend was white. This story begins in the middle. Halfway across the planet. I think that I'm awake. Last night at dusk, I took a red eye across the Atlantic. I landed on the first morning of summer in Europe. For the last 40-something hours, it's been day. I think I might be dreaming, but I'm not sure. I'm in Paris for a festival of contemporary choreographers from Africa. By the grace of God, I get to watch. It's one of the perks. I've managed to convince the performing arts machine that I am both high art and hip-hop. Don't tell them. I'm stuck. I'm in between. Last row of the audience falling up, waking dream. In Paris, I represent my country in the flesh. I am the surrogate for Allen Iverson and 50 Cent. But what good is a black man in America if stripped of his right to threats? How hip-hop can I be if they let me on today's set? Anyway, as a guest of the institution, I'm at this festival, and on the first night, there's this soloist from South Africa. She does this joint where she puts on this Easter Bunny costume head thing, and a pink tutu and like Pippi long stocking tights and a point shoe and a Converse, okay? And she performs this piece where she climbs in and out of a plastic bag. Yeah. For like 20 minutes, okay? And then she walks into the audience with saran wrap, and she puts it over people's mouths, and she kisses them over their dental damned lips for like another 20 minutes, and then it ends. That's it. In my head, the vision of South Africa is Robben Island, Stephen Biko. In my head, it is always the late 80s. And Nelson Mandela is the first person that I ever truly wanted to be free. The first major metaphor for liberating me. The triangle of perspective is crazy. I'm looking at this African woman for some sense of root. She's looking at European performance art, trading in a mandala for a frayed pink tutu. And Europeans have always been looking at me. Ever since my name was Langston, Satchmo, Josephine, since the days when they bred me. I am the descendant of an experiment in psyche and body, a fetish taking my place in line. Fractured, wondering when this woman's history stopped being mine. I've been flying for the last 40-something hours. I have no sense of time. I'm just wondering which one of us is sleep and which one is just tired. And then, exactly right then, I fall. This story begins in the middle. Halfway across the planet. I think that I'm awake. Last night at dusk, I took a red eye across the Pacific. I landed on the first morning of summer in Japan. For the last 40-something hours, it's been day. I think I might be dreaming, but I'm not sure. I'm a living word lost in translation. I guess this is a near-death experience. I'm at the club in Japan. Everybody in hip-hop knows that the culture is huge over here. Mostly because we've seen it on a Yo MTV Raps interview with the Wu-Tang Clan. Tokyo is like Times Square times 10. Midnight feels like 11 a.m. plugged into a socket. My hosts are all hip-hop kids. They insist, tired as I am, I'll roll with them to the spot. I lead with my ego. I think, why not? I imagine that when I enter the club, the music will stop. The rivers will part. The reverence will begin. Behold, Japanese mother lovers that sweat my culture. Authenticity is in the building. It's me. Thank you. Born 1975 in Queens, Tribe Called Quest, Nas, Run DMC. The real hip-hop is obviously oozing from all of my pores for all to see, and all ignore me. I am the only black dude in the room, except for the ones we're all listening to. I'm either so racist or self-absorbed or oblivious that I imagine some kind of props are due. Fist up. Head nods. Eye contact. None of that. I'm invisible. Race doesn't matter. I am just another guy that might be a little too old to be at the club. And in the great tradition of the wrong guy at the right party, I retired to a corner. The music still thumping. But I ain't been asleep since yesterday something. and I fall. This story begins in the middle with the first African American woman that I ever met. It was a white chick from Lubbock, Texas. Molly Melching, big woman. She moved to Senegal 20 years ago to work for UNESCO, and she never left. She married a Senegalese man, had a daughter, was happy until he left. Molly speaks Wolof, Tree. She's a beast negotiator at the marketplace, geared down, highly respected in her community. The Senegalese that I meet refer to Molly as an African American. They refer to me as a Black American. When I get off the plane in Senegal, I don't really have plans. I don't have much money. I have Molly's number in my back pocket given to me by friends of friends. I have ideas in my head also given to me by friends of friends. They say, boy, in Africa, they will love you. Just find the dancers, find the hip hop. Somebody will adopt you, take you in. Don't worry. Don't trip. 3 days into my trip, I've been hustled out of my drawers. And I'm spending money at a pace that's going to leave me homeless in 8 days. I got one of those non-transferable, non-fuck-wittable tickets. It says I got to be here for 4 months. In tears, I call Molly. She invites me to her home in Chess. She says I can stay. Not quite the African I thought was going to take me in. Molly works for an NGO called Tostan. She's a champion of women's health. She works to fight against female circumcision in rural villages. She calls it mutilation. I become her roadie. I sit in the back seat, gazing at endless stretches of endless flat land and wide open sky as we ride from one end of the country to the other. We ride to the middle of nowhere. Nowhere, okay? Come to a stop in front of a single stone building with a thatched roof. 3 girls come out, all smiles and grace. They greet. I think, cool, Molly's going to meet with them, and then we're going to be out. And then this boy comes out, and he starts playing a drum, which I think is kind of annoying to have going on during a meeting, but, who the hell am I? The American. So I just smile and listen for my name. Take it all in. All of the nowhere. This kid playing the drum, apparently he's this village's version of a mass email. Because I don't know where the hell these people come from, but like 100,000 people storm the courtyard. It's like the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day, and they all come to see the circus in town, which is namely the big white African and her short, clueless American friend. Molly is spilling her propaganda about this backwards indigenous ritual, but nobody can hear anything because of all the commotion, all the people, everybody trying to see the one white woman within 1,000 miles. Finally, Mal comes out. She says, Bamuthi, I need you to distract them. Molly, I'm a poet, and they don't speak English. I ain't got no microphone, no megaphone, no radio, no telephone, whatever. How am I going to keep them distracted, whatever? I'm withering here. I need water. I need... Molly, do it! Five minutes later, the entire village. I'm surrounded. My heart pounding. Africa. Okay. I don't need to astound them. Only distract. No microphone, no radio, no English. That's cool. That's cool. It's my whole act. To survive, I become a hip-hop empath. I channel the low beginnings. Fires burning all over the Bronx, post-civil rights. Glass ceilings, no lights, no loot. Just do what you feel to the groove. A dance floor uprising of youth. I just pray that they buy it. It's the future.
future aesthetic, the future's not static, it's moving kinetically, manic, you mimic a cynic, a smith that works with flurried words. The world is this minute, magnanimous moment, a future aesthetic, a mythopoetic, cerebral and so vivid, kinesthetic is not in your head or your heart or your feet, it exists in all three. Woo! Okay, they're buying it. Well, I'm cracking them up with my shamrocks. Molly is speaking in a language I've never heard of. She convinces the Council of Elders to abandon a centuries-old practice, encourages them to modernize their attitude towards women. Molly extended me. That's how I became an MC. Without saying a word. It's ethereal, lyrical, miracle, biblical, spiritual. It's ethereal, it's ethereal, it's ethereal, lyrical, miracle, almost. It's ethereal, lyrical, miracle, almost biblical, the spiritual, cyclical, steerable, unnearable, hearable, liminal, spherical, physical, quizzical. Is it real? Oh my! Thank you.
Journey, but now has got a final resting place here in Madagascar.
Please welcome the Honorable Jane Harmon, Director, President, and CEO of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars.
Well, after that opening act, I feel like one of the dullest, pinkest, most boring people on the planet. But I am here to welcome you to what will be a wonderful event and to thank the International Trade Center, the Art and Embassies program, and the Aspen Institute, my dear friend Elliot Gerson is somewhere down there, for partnering with us on this event. Let me say something about Beth DeZortz, the ambassador to the art, or for the Art and Embassies program. She came by the Wilson Center recently and said, I have this idea. What would you think about 5 or 6 of the greatest artists in America having, or on the planet, having a conversation about art at the Wilson Center? And she could barely get that out. I said, yes! Because what is so little understood is how important culture is as a foreign policy tool, and how underutilized it is as a foreign policy tool. I, some of you may know, served in our Congress for 9 terms. I am a recovering politician, and left voluntarily, not involuntarily, last year to take up this amazing plum job. And I know from the travels I made in Congress all over the world to garden spots like Libya, Syria, North Korea, etc., but also to somewhat nicer venues, how critical this program is to showcase what America stands for in our embassies, and how important art is as an education tool, as a way to knit civilization together everywhere in the world. And I'll just take this moment to pitch a big audience for more funding for the arts and for the Arts and Embassies program. And I thought you should know that just down the road here in the post office building is the headquarters of the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, headed by a wonderful freeform called Rocco Landesman. And he told me recently that the funding for the NEA, get this, just everyone sit down and focus on this. This is our national arts program, is $146 million for a country of over 300 million people. Do the math. That is under 50 cents a person to bring sustenance to the people who live in the United States of America. Did you know that the budget for Skyfall, the new Bond movie, was more than that? So I put that out there, and I put out there how critical this program is, and how beautiful, if you were watching the slideshow, which I was watching, is the art that these artists, whom you will hear from in a minute, bring to us and bring to this program. And it is very important at a time when the world seems more dangerous than ever, and when U.S. embassies look like fortresses, that we can showcase in them some beauty, like the beauty that you saw in the slideshow, and like the beauty that will be discussed by these artists. So as an arts lover myself, who was married for over 30 years to a guy named Sidney Harmon, who always used to say, what a coincidence that Sidney Harmon Hall in Washington has the same name I do, and who quoted poetry at the drop of a hat. I revere this stuff. And yes, Beth, yes. Just ask me again. Thank you very much, and please welcome Virginia Sorrell.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jane. Thank you to the rest of the Wilson Center team, the Aspen team, Elliot, Mary Elena, Damian Puono. Thank you, Beth DeZortz, our director. And I also, of course, I want to thank the artists, the 5 incredible artists that I've luckily had the opportunity to work with over the years, and to all the artists in the room who've worked with our program over the years. The video that you just watched gave you a glimpse of Art and Embassies today. Art and Embassies today has changed. Over the past decade, our program has grown immensely. And we're incredibly proud of the way our program has changed in terms of now we don't only work with American artists, we actually work with artists from the host country. It's now a program not just about America, it's about cross-cultural exchange. We now do artist exchanges. In the past decade, we've done over 100 cultural exchanges. And We're going to continue doing the cultural exchanges. This has become a new focus for the program. Acquisitions has become a new part of our program. We now oversee all the new permanent embassies and consulates around the world. So two-way cultural exchanges become the core of the mission, and that's basically all we wanted to say tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll go ahead and jump into the conversation, what we're all here for. So connecting us back to our roots, a man who needs no introduction, the director of the Museum of Modern Art, Mr. Glenn Lowry.
Do we have an order?
I don't know that we have an order. I think we'll just take it as it comes. Okay. And I'll try and remember where everybody is sitting. So good evening. I'm Glenn Lowry, and I'm delighted to be sharing the stage with 5 extraordinary artists to celebrate not only their work and their achievement and their recognition by the Art and Embassies program, but the 50 years of this remarkable effort on the part of this country to underscore the importance of the arts to us as people and to our dialogue and friendship with those around the world. It is an important moment, especially for me representing the Museum of Modern Art, because the Art and Embassies program was born in part through the Museum of Modern Art in its very early years. And I just want to say that no one then, I'm sure, could have envisioned, Beth, what this has grown into. You and your incredible team have done an astounding job, and I think the work that you were able to see earlier this evening is a small reflection of the many great things that you have made possible. So with me tonight are 5 artists whose work I admire enormously. Cai Guo-Qiang, and Cai is in the midst, and maybe he'll tell us about it in a moment, he's in the midst of preparing a work for tomorrow that will help celebrate another institution, the Sackler Gallery, as it marks its 25th anniversary. Shahzia Sikander, an extraordinary artist from Pakistan, now living in the United States, who revived, I won't say single-handedly, but who certainly was instrumental in the revival of an old tradition, miniature painting, but investing it with new meanings and new possibilities that continue to resonate today and that have affected an enormous number of artists throughout the Middle East, Pakistan, and India. Jeff Koons, who we count as one of our own, who before he became the celebrated artist that he is, had a brief moment at the Museum of Modern Art where his work is still legendary, but who's gone on to be one of the most celebrated and important artists working anywhere in the world, and whose sculpture, paintings, and ideas form the backbone of an intense conversation about what surrealism as well as pop art can be in the 21st century. Carrie Weems, who's been a voice for the power of women, of identity, and of race, who's tackled some of the most difficult issues around, but who's always done so with an elegance and grace I count as a great friend. And Kiki Smith, who has managed in her work to discover mysteries and spirits and ideas that we didn't know existed, who, like Carrie, is willing to tackle questions of identity and of gender, but who also has brought forth the pleasures of thinking about the environment and ecology, and whose work never ceases to surprise me. So you can imagine how honored I am to be here. So let me start, Cai, with a question to you. You embody, I think, much of what this program stands for, cultural exchange and the openness to ideas from different places and different peoples. What is it like to be preparing a major work for the mall here in Washington?
OK， 其实这个主办也是这个
使馆艺术办公室和25周年一起做的。
Because the project I'm working on is co-organized by Art and Embassies and also the Sackler Gallery.
然后这个是我因为在圣诞节期间，我找到一个40尺高的圣诞树一样的，上面挂了2000个黑色的蛋，在白天呢1点了以后有3次爆炸。
And since their birthdays fall on the holiday season, I decided to choose a Christmas tree. And then on this 40 feet tall Christmas tree, I'm putting over 2,000 fireworks on the tree. And then during the explosion, there will be a free ignition.
所以第一次会有1.5秒冲上。
So the first explosion lasts 1.5 seconds and go from bottom to top.
然後煙一稍微移動了以後，會像點燈一樣，咚咚咚咚咚咚咚咚咚5秒。
And when the smoke clears slightly, there will be a tree lighting ceremony where the smoke puffs will twinkle all over the tree, boom, 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 for 5 seconds.
那第3次會等這個煙都閃光了，乾乾淨淨的時候，突然砰，全部那一次。
And for the third time, when the smoke completely clears, all the fireworks go boom, and then you see a clear tree.
所以看起來這個樹呢，好像是那個晚上的聖誕樹的相反的那個底片。
So I'm hoping the tree will look like a film negative of a Christmas tree at night, except this would happen during the day.
那同時炸了以後，這個水墨一樣的樹這樣移開，一個真實的一個虛的樹變成2棵樹。
And I'm hoping at the end of the explosion, you'll have 2 trees, one real tree, another cloud smoke tree that's drifting away. So you have one real tree and one virtual tree.
所以明天的風。
So I'm praying for the wind tomorrow.
太快了，大家眼睛就跟着快一點吧。
So if the wind is really high and the smoke drifts off really quickly, your eyeballs will have to roll more quickly too.
歡迎大家來。
What time will it take place, Sai?
3點。
Free in the afternoon.
希望大家不要晚點，因為華盛頓的安全是很不容易拿下來。
Don't be
在這段時間裡面，所有的交通都會被管制的。
Because it's incredibly hard to get permits in Washington, D.C., and so there was lots of traffic control hurdles to be leapt over.
3 o'clock, if you're working, take time off. If you're not working, be there. It will be fantastic. Jeff, you've worked all over the world. Your sculpture is legendary. How did you come about selecting the work you did for the embassy in Beijing?
Glenn, I thought about what pieces at that moment were finished that were available, and the tulips just seemed like it would be a wonderful choice for the reflection pond. And so myself and my wife, we offered the tulips to go. And so it was agreed that the embassy would show tulips. But I have to say, when I saw the photographs of the work installed, and I saw the large scholar stones that were around the piece, I was so moved. It was like the most ideal setting that I could imagine, not just with the architecture and the reflection pond, but then to have these large scholar stones there. But it was just organic, thinking about a work that would symbolize optimism. The tulips creates like a rainbow, and it's an optimistic piece.
They're part of your celebration series, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's one of the great achievements that you've been working on now for quite a while. And what's the genesis of that series, and what does it try to do?
Well, I would have to say my work in general, but I would think with the celebration series, I started to really try to focus on just connecting with archetypal imagery and to just follow my interests and focus on those interests. But everything seems to have an aspect of tied to a cyclical year. So tulips are kind of a symbol of spring. Other works from that series, a hanging heart could maybe be Valentine's Day, or you could associate a cracked egg or something, maybe Easter, but an aspect of a cyclical time. But everything is a little larger, a little mythic in scale. And so tulips was part of that series.
Carrie, I was struck by something that you said at some point, and I can't even remember where and when, but in talking about your work, where you were discussing that you've come to address issues of love and other matters, but your work is always about race. And Carrie's work, if you don't know it, often uses text and images that you take yourself but find, and text that you write and find as well. How did you come to use these different sort of almost intersecting strategies, the word and the image?
Oh, golly, that's a long story. But I probably think more of it is, I think that my work is really focused in the area of unrequited love. I think that all those other issues of race and gender and so forth, are really subordinate to this other deeper idea, more complex idea about the struggle and the battle for love and affection and desire and need and wants. So I'm always sort of grappling with those ideas. And but early on when I was a student, I had a really wonderful teacher, and we fought a great deal, which is I have a history of fighting with lots of people.
She may look mild-mannered up here.
And but we had these really sort of great talks about photography, and one day he said to me, "So what's this about?" And I said, "It's obvious, you can tell, and the picture is worth 1,000 words." And he said, "Yes, that's true, but which 1,000 are you talking about specifically?" And so it was a question. It was a question. It was a challenge. And I've been for a long time making work then based in image and text. Though for the last many years, actually, I haven't been really doing that so much. Though I continue to write a great deal in relationship to the work.
You've been doing a lot of video work.
I've been doing a lot of video work. And I think actually that sort of gives me that opportunity to play with ideas about sound and voice. And I have a chance to work with musicians. And of course, in this context, in the American Embassy context, artists were very, very important. Musicians were very important in the early years of arts and embassies programs around the world. I mean, the sort of great music of people like Dizzy Gillespie and Armstrong and et cetera. They were really, really important. That book, Satchmo Blows Away the World, was absolutely critical in really understanding the role of artists, music, literature in cultural diplomacy. And so it's sort of wonderful that I get a chance now to work with musicians as I do my own work. And tomorrow night, thanks to Virginia Shore, who I've now known for many, many years, and I love working with this program. I get a chance to work with the amazing artist and pianist Jason Moran as we sort of work out some ideas around sound and image and word.
And I do think we should give Virginia a huge round of applause for the work she does. But pause for a moment. Madagascar.
I know. Amazing, right? I've always wanted to go there too.
And did you get to go?
No, I haven't.
So you got your work there, but
my work is there, and so that I'm happy with that. However, it is also in Mali, so that's fabulous, and I've been to Mali. And in fact, the images that are used in the embassy there were photographs that were made in this great ancient city of Djenné in northern Mali. So I'm very pleased that the work is there and that it's taken on another life of its own.
Shahzia, you have the pleasure of being from Pakistan, living in the States, but having your work as part of the Art and Embassies program in Pakistan. Did you think about what work would be appropriate for the embassy?
Actually, the work that I did, I definitely thought about it.
You want to share the title with us, because I think it's important?
I am also not my own enemy. And, I think a lot of my work is really also about translation, the distance between the original, or the idea of the original, and what may be an interpretation or something new. And And what is that distance? And I think even in this particular work, I am also not my own enemy. It opens up that dialogue, like who is the enemy here or not. And it also refers actually to Mirza Ghalib's phrase, a poet, and it's his a text borrowed from his language. And again, it's in Urdu, but it's written in English. So, and the way it's painted also, it references the U.S. colors.
What has always struck me is so interesting about your work is how you've taken this older language, the language of miniature painting, and found new ways to invest it with stories. Where did the stories come from? Are they personal? Do you find them in literature? How do you think about your work as it relates to the present?
I think as an artist, as an individual, as a person, I think a lot of the information surrounds us, and it's how much you're absorbing. And so a lot of it is culled from newspapers, from history books, from other artists' work, from literature, everything. I think the culture at large. And then it's also about how much of it becomes part of your own language. So I think I'm interested in that process, like what does it mean to own something, the act of ownership. Because again, the interest in miniature painting was removed from a cultural specificity. It wasn't because one was from Pakistan or studying there that you had to do miniature painting. It was a very objective, non-nostalgic interest in learning something and understanding its context, its history, and then getting interested in a sort of a floodgate that happened. There was so much to process, to juxtapose, as well as see it through the lens of the colonial history too. So I think there's not one place through which I'm accessing ideas, but several places, and a lot of it is create imagination, and how can you make something that might communicate to a larger audience? How do you make work which is compelling, and how do you define what is compelling also? So I think at the end of it, it's also about communication. How do you make work that can communicate? And then translation, like what is translation in that respect?
Is the issue of translation, Kiki, for you? Sorry. The issue, first of all, I should say Kiki is one of the most generous artists in the world. She's generous with her time, as every artist here. But there is, I think, in her work, a profound generosity of spirit, and something that I'm always struck by. So much of your work feels like it's giving itself to someone else, to all of us who get to look at it. Do you think of issues of translation, of how you absorb other ideas from cultures or ideas from literature, or how you transfer your work, as it were, from something very private to something that enters the public sphere?
Well, we're just fluid. Things are just coming in and out of us, and some moments we have like the nets tighter, that we trap something that stays in our consciousness and then kind of flows out of our consciousness again. That's one of the, creativity is fluid, and, it's a vehicle. Like, it seems to me that art is a space that keeps, demanding that depth of our human consciousness gets to have expression, and particularly within the bounds of like societies that are often restrictive and constrictive. You know, that art keeps like chopping out space and has this ability to move and be fluid from different cultures. I mean, like I always say, I am part or I inherit the entire history of creativity in the world, and that's my lineage, and I have access to that lineage. And you go to attraction, and I think like love and also, you know, I think a lot of art is about gift making. It is about gift making. It is about trying to like synthesize something outside of yourself that you can then like reflect and look at, and but it also is something that has the capacity for other people to have their own authentic experience too, and embrace. So, you know, it is like water in water. I mean, we are essentially, I would think, like creative and technological beings, and besides that, you know, we're just things that food goes through. You know, so it's the most natural that we make creative, you know, have some way of making creative expression. And, you know, certainly within the context of the embassies, you know, we are all extremely fortunate, and also the people working. This was my thing. Like the people working, it's most important that America has this like history, problematic history with visual arts and a suspicion of visual arts. And it is just because of our history, you know, but, you know, so it hasn't been, you know, so supported in the governmental ways, like in the broad culture like that, but it has always been supported by individuals because, and, you know, this is one of the great contributions we have here. Now I forgot what I was saying because I always forget what I'm saying. But anyway, that's another thing.
I should say that speaking of lineages, you come from a remarkable lineage of artists. Your sister Seton, who's a terrific photographer, is here with us tonight. And you're both here because you're celebrating your father's 100th birthday. Is that right? Yeah. The National Gallery. Yeah. So.
My father is Tony Smith, and on Saturday there's a talk at the National Gallery about his work by some people from the museum, but also the artist Charlie Ray is speaking on his work, which is for us the greatest privilege to hear.
Well, you know, that's one of the wonderful things about being in an environment like this, that this kind of programming sort of brings together, that not only do we get a chance to revel in our own sort of world, we get a chance I get a chance to be with Kiki, you know, who I adore, and I want to consume your work. I mean, there are pieces that you've made over the years that I literally want to eat. I mean, they're absolutely, you know, that I feel so lucky that I have the opportunity to be with each of you, learning about each of you, knowing each of you, and that to that extent, then, that there's this level of community that exists amongst us that I think is really sort of extraordinary. And again, I think that it's these kinds of programs that allow us really to come together, because for the most part, we're all very, very busy in our own studios working.
But we are, as artists, international by, you know, just fundamentally, you know, outside of any structure. We exist in a fluid, international.
That's right, that you are home.
Yeah.
That you are home, and that you feel the ability to work almost anywhere. Rosa Luxemburg said, "I am home where in the world there are clouds and birds and human tears," which I absolutely love. So that I never feel like there is any great distance, even though we talk about these ideas about translation, meaning who owns something, that, you know, that there's something really wonderful about the ability to sort of to break through those artificial boundaries of construct, to exist in the world as human. Right? Not man, not woman, but as human, as artists, as people that are deeply interested in the experience of living and making.
Yeah, and I think at that level, we don't require translation. And that is really the interface of art, that it naturally doesn't require a translation, so no boundaries. And thus, it's harder to define and put down on, probably harder to digest.
And yet artists are considered dangerous.
Well, if you've been around sized work,
everywhere, yeah.
it can be dangerous.
以前那个只有外交官是整天乘飞机，像中国的那个外交官才有可能去几十个国家在以前啊，所以我当时乘了飞机30几个国家，人家说你怎么可能乘30几个国家？现在艺术家像外交官一样在天上整天飞来飞去的。
So back in the days, only diplomats get to jet set all over the world, and especially in China, if you're an important diplomat, you might have a chance to go to several countries. So when I mentioned to a Chinese diplomat that I've been to over 30 countries, he was absolutely shocked. How could you? But nowadays, all artists are like diplomats; they go everywhere.
因为我们也说一点外交嘛，外交在艺术的作用。
Well, we should probably talk about the role of art in diplomacy.
艺术在外交的作用，艺术在外交的作用啊。相反的，我说反了。
Oh, he made a mistake, but I didn't.
Okay. 我说一点那个艺术在外交作用。
So let's talk about the role of art in diplomacy.
就是那个上10月份我去日本去拿一个奖，那个归纳里也给我在MoMA做过记者会。
Back in October, I was fortunate enough to win the Premium Imperiale in Japan, and Lowry actually announced my laureateship in MoMA a while back.
当时那个伊斯尼亚给做了2套衣服，一套给我在日本演讲，一套给我在这边演讲。
And at the time, A.C. Miyake gave me 2 outfits, one for the ceremony in Japan and one for the ceremony in New York.
但是没想到那个期间，中国和日本为那个钓鱼岛事情一直在沸腾2个国家。
But never would I have thought that Sino-Japanese relations would have reached the highest tension during that time over the bickering of the ownership of the Diaoyu Islands.
所以很多人都2个国家政府策划的4000个以上的这个友好活动都被取消了。
So over 4,000 events and activities that were planned by the Chinese and Japanese governments were completely canceled.
但是我还是去了。
But I still went to Japan.
因为这也是一个第一次，一个中国的出身的中国籍的艺术家拿了这个世界奖。
Because it was the first time that a Chinese-born artist was given this award.
结果我去了以后，当然日本的主办者很高兴。
So after I went, the Japanese organizers were very pleased.
然后中国的大使也来了。
And the Chinese ambassador was kind enough to come.
因为他们取消了很多活动，但他们还是来我的授奖仪式。
Even though they canceled all these cultural exchange activities, they still came to my award ceremony.
每天白天他都要被日本外交部招去外交部，给他说你们又侵犯我们的主权了。他说不，那是我们的领土。这样争论了一下再回来。
So during the day, the foreign offices of both countries would sort of yell at each other and say, no, these islands are ours, and no, these islands are ours. But in the evening, they all sit down together and have a nice dinner.
对，所以这个就是艺术有时候能做政治上做不到的事情。
So sometimes art can do things that politics cannot.
他们打算。所以中国的外交方面打算出席，他们也是想这是艺术，这是艺术。
So the Chinese diplomats were kind enough to come and say, "Oh, this is only art."
对，这因为艺术是很直接的，从情感上，从人的那个对话开始的。
Because art is always a very emotional exchange and experience between different human beings.
No, I think that's said so beautifully, Cai, that one of the things that all of us who have the privilege of working in the arts know is that there's a community that we live in. It's a little bit what Kiki and Carrie were talking about, that we live in this community and it doesn't actually matter where we are. we are always connected to interesting people who, even if they have different political positions, share a common belief in the value of art. And I think that's what the Art and Embassy program constantly underscores. And Jeff, I wonder, you've worked in some of the most interesting places. You've tackled Versailles, for instance, brought it to its heels with your installation. When you do those kinds of projects, and then for those of you who don't know Jeff, probably 5 years ago now, I'm guessing it was more or less that.
Yes, I think it was around 2008. 2008, Justine?
I was invited to do an installation in Versailles, one of the most hallowed spaces in French. And if anyone knows the French, they're not really good about sharing their cultural prowess with the rest of the world, especially with Americans, who they see as upstarts. But there you were. What was it like? Did you see yourself in a way as an ambassador for the United States there?
I think artists always, and the people that are here, people that are participating, that's the main drive. You want to participate. And so when you're young, you get together with your friends, you talk about art, and you, to your desire, you participate. And art's about connections. And the more connections, the more powerful it is. So when I was younger, I would think about what Louis XIV, what Louis XIV, what fantasies he would have when, to be able to have complete economic and political freedom to create something. And we all have these freedoms every day and art's really about how much freedom that you give to yourself. But what maybe his fantasies would be. And so when I went to Versailles, I was just very, very open. What would seem like a natural piece to place in different rooms. But Glenn, my experience with art, in a nutshell, is really that it's a vehicle that lets you have self-acceptance. You participate in learning to know yourself, and once you have a sense of yourself, you automatically want to go outward, and you want to have a dialogue about everything that's external. And, it leads you to have everything in play. It's about all these connections. And it's about other people and acceptance of others. So automatically you're in this dialogue that you want to also have more and more open to you. And that openness comes from acceptance, accepting everything around you and letting it be in play, to let it be in dialogue. And that's where art finds its interests, its information, its ability to connect.
One of this evening is about cultural exchange and cultural diplomacy, and it seems to me that one of the places where so much of that exchange occurs is often in the form of the biennial. Those exhibitions that occur every other year, sometimes they're every third year, in case of some, every fifth year. But they bring together artists from around the world, often for a moment, in a place that sometimes might not be exposed to recent work by a number of people. And I'm interested in how those of us who are consumers of biennials find them fascinating, because they're, I don't want to call them one-stop shopping, but they provide a unique moment to take a pulse. And I wonder what it's like from the point of view of an artist to be part of a biennial. I think, Shahzia, you're working for the Sharjah Biennial. This is one of the newer biennials that takes place in Sharjah in the Gulf in March, if I'm correct. What's that like, and what kind of work are you doing for that? And how do you feel about being? You meet other artists? Does it engage you in a way that's different than when you're just doing a show in New York or in Los Angeles?
Absolutely. I think especially the Sharjah Biennial, because being in New York, you are pretty much separated. It's from that region, versus sort of living nearby or close by. So that's one aspect. The other is that I have been to UAE several times, but not necessarily to engage with the context of Sharjah and the foundation itself. So this time I really was much more open to understanding its history in the region and its relationship to Pakistan and its relationship to other Asian countries, because there's lots of migrant workers, lots of people, expats that also bring to life that area. So all of those things are swimming in one's head, which is not necessarily going to happen if you're working in the studio and making your next body of work or putting a show up. So definitely you have to shift gears and think differently. So I'm doing a variety of projects there. Since my primary practice is drawing, there's a lot of new drawings after visiting and exploring Sharjah and looking through lots of imagery and its history. A few years back, a few decades ago, it was very different. So it's and then I'm doing like a multi-channel video animation work. I'm working with another musician for the sound, and also working on a film project which will be shot there in 2 weeks on site. So there's a lot of relationship to the location, engaging with the people there, engaging much more with the fabric of the host country or the host society in that respect. It is about acceptance. It's also about finding ways to engage through a different tempo, rhythm, and then also learning in the process more, and how to create that boundary that's going to create something meaningful between that particular engagement as well as the larger platform, which is well visited, as we know, by globally through everybody. So I think in that respect, biennials as platforms are very critical, because they do become the space, at least for contemporary art, where we see a variety of things which we don't necessarily are privy to, being in just the U.S. or in New York.
I think it's also, I think that the thing that's important, and I think that this sort of underscores what you were just saying, that you have to do what we do, you have to love it.
Yeah.
You really have to love, like I am a slave to my work. It tells me what to do. It gets me up in the morning, and it tells me when I'm going to go to bed at night. It rules my life. And there are parts of it that I find absolutely maddening, and there are parts of it that absolutely save me. Art has saved my life on more than one occasion. And how we participate in the world, I think, that this thing called diplomacy is a very complex thing. It's not a static thing, and that it exists on many different levels. From this way in which Kiki was talking about, the way in which the things are simply flowing, information, ideas, emotion, concept, being, that these things are flowing back and forth through many different channels. So that there, on the one hand, there's that this emotional thing, this thing that we are attempting to live through, that we're attempting to communicate through volumes of stored information, sensibility, concept, being. Right? Is one thing. The way in which we work as artists, that you can be I can be in Mexico, or I can be in South Africa, and the artist and the people assume that the work was made there, that it is transcended where it was made, that it's now simply about what the material is and what the material is trying to get at that becomes really much more important. So that there's that aspect of diplomacy, that you are becoming a part of a larger world, that you're breaking down barriers and boundaries, which is really what we're talking about, right? That how do we disrupt the boundaries, the bridges that separate us from one another, and how do we do that in an elegant and a challenging way, in a way that is respectful of the difference between the group of us. So that on the one hand, I have the extraordinary privilege to work with FAPE on the one hand, with Art and Embassies here. But there's nothing like being in Rome and making a body of work and having a group of Romans come to me and tell me that this is the first time that they've understood their city in this way, and that they're shocked and surprised. That something else has happened now, that something else, some other kind of information, some other kind of dialogue is now possible between me and that group of people, because something else has happened. That something else is broken, that something else has been built up, actually. And that, I think, is exciting. So the diplomacy exists in many, many ways, and that each in our own way, I think, direct it, control it, manifest it, speak it, live it.
That's something nice, too, about the Art and Embassies is that the diversity of voices or of practices or of some sort of manifestations of things, they don't have to go together. And I think that's one of our great American heritages of living in this country now as artists, in particular as women artists, our generation, that we have had such a fortunate, we've taken such a fortunate position that we get to do our work, but that it's really large, the space that art can occupy, and that it's not only to make cultural understanding. It's also to stand in that things are incomprehensible, enigmatic, not able to be quantified or understood, they're idiosyncratic, and they're outside, and that it's really important to have models of incoherence and models of difference, and not make these sort of mushy, happy, everybody in the world's happy with each other culturally, but art allows the space for that, and many places in international diplomacy or whatever are intolerant of that non-knowing space, and that's a great thing that art affords and is a model for in the world, I think.
Kiki, if I could just say something. When we speak about culture too, culture can be such a large kind of word, but in a way it's just like a personality, and it's a personality of a group of people. And art is an experience that really just happens in a singular viewer. And it brings us back to that, nations are made up of individuals. And we all contribute to this kind of being of a whole. And then also interacting with each other. That's really about individuals relating to each other and communicating and having a dialogue, one-on-one.
Speaking of a dialogue, this is supposed to be about exchange, and I think we should take a few minutes to see if there are any questions from those of you in the audience for any one of these wonderful artists who are sharing the evening with us. So don't be shy if you have a question. Do we have a process for questions, or shall I just... People have been writing them down?
You're so cool. You're so zen.
But you know what? I like taking it as it flies. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and I'll call on you and just speak loudly.
I'll say something really quick. Oh, no, you've got it. No, I just want to say something really quick, because we're all artists, but Sai-san is my curator. He has curated me in 2 international exhibitions of my own museum shows in his museums, because, he, as all artists and all human beings, can have many facets to, we get to be citizens as artists, we get to be artists, we get to do whatever else we're doing, but he's someone in a unique position that has made his own museums, has taken his own museums, occupied his own museums, and so he is a very important cultural model, I think, of the complexity of what an artist can be today. Anyway, sorry.
No, that was great, Kiki.
But he's great.
He is great.
He's my curator.
In the back, there was a question, I think. Yes? Did everyone hear that question? She asked if any of these artists, but I think she was directing it perhaps at Jeff in particular, when they create a work that might go to an embassy or abroad, are they trying to send a specific message? Carrie?
Well, that's not my case. I mean, I think I just make work. I make work that I'm really deeply interested in and that really engages me. And then I think that it's been the thing that's been interesting is that. And then there's a real consideration about what will be the best work for a certain embassy, so that out of the many pieces that I've produced over the years, maybe only a few of them really speak in I think in a certain way that allows that work to go maybe to Madagascar or Liberia or the U.S. mission in New York. So no, I haven't. I've never made anything with the mission in mind. I haven't had that experience, but maybe others here have.
我的情况就是他问的有一点点兴奋，就是使馆艺术找我去给北京的美国大使馆做作品，对我来说是一个很新鲜的事情。
So my work was probably trying to do something like you had mentioned when Art and Embassies invited me to create a piece for the embassy in Beijing. I was very excited.
说实话，在北京的所有的政府的部门里面，我还没有一件作品在里面挂着。所以变成唯一一件在北京的政府里面就是美国大使馆。
So to be honest with you, no Chinese government agency has ever commissioned me to create a work for their government building. So it happens that Americans were the first to ask.
所以当时我用火药炸了一只鹰和一棵松树。
So I used gunpowder to depict an eagle and a pine tree branch.
好像两个国家的一些东西有一点在发生关系。
So these two things from the two different countries are creating a relationship with each other.
但艺术家刚才他们大家也说了，就是在不同的文化做作品的时候，经常有很多技巧，有时候跟外交官很像，有时候又不一样。
But when artists work in the world in different countries, like everyone here has mentioned, everyone has their little tricks. It's like being a diplomat. Everyone have their own set of skills.
就是像我去年12月在多哈，因为是一个阿拉伯的文化里面，我就感到自己特别不理解，所以应该怎么做很担心。
So last December when I was working in Doha in Qatar, because it's in the Arab world and I felt mystified by it, I was very worried.
所以我就花了50天带着我的团队一直住在那边。
So I brought my team and stayed there for 50 days.
那跟当地很多义工一起合作。
And I tried to work with volunteers from local communities.
然后有时候我要写一个阿拉伯字叫脆弱，也是他们手把着手我教出来的。
And when I tried to write fragile in Arabic, the museum staff held my hand and taught me how to write it.
所以慢慢的我就想炸他们那个女性的阿巴亚。他们也就容忍我做了。
And because I've invested so much of my own energy there, when I wanted to put gunpowder on the abaya robes that local women wear, the museum was very tolerant.
因为他们知道我是认真的。
Because the museum knows that I'm very serious about what I do.
他们知道我是认真的，是在跟他们的文化对话。
And they know that I'm trying to create a dialogue with their culture.
后来我又做了他们的那个国王的马皇，拍这个马是怎么的受惊啊，怎么的马杀鸡，怎么的跑那个跑步机啊，这样的奢侈怎么养大的。
And then I made a video piece documenting how the Arabian horses are raised in their specialized breeding and training center, because these horses be artificially inseminated, and then they would go through a very strict fitness and beauty regimen every day, where they swim laps in the swimming pool and then run on a treadmill, and then you get a shower, shampooed, massage, beautified with all different ointments.
It's good to be a horse in some places.
对，所以后来我甚至也做了一个叫一起飞的，把一个骆驼象征阿拉伯的文化符号，还有一群鹰，把它抓起来当了一个装置，做了一个装置，他们也都支持我完成。
And when I made another installation called Flying Together with a flock of falcons lifting a camel, the museum staff were very supportive and wanted to finish the work.
所以我感到重要就是要尊重他们。还有跟真诚的在对话，试图理解他们这些文化的不同。
So if you start by respecting these cultural differences and earnestly try to initiate a dialogue with all different peoples, then people will learn to accept you.
他们相信我们是尊重他们的，他们就愿意尊重我们做一些事情。
And people will learn to respect you and trust you and give you creative freedom.
后来当然我的艺术也会影响了他们一些年轻的艺术家，思考如何从自己的传统文化发展成当代的。
And I was hoping that my art practice would influence young artists from the region, so they can see how to transform their cultural icons into works that contemporary works of art.
但他们也影响了我做了一些很好的东西，而且思考阿拉伯和世界的关系等等。
They also influenced me deeply and allowed me to contemplate from a new angle the relationship between the Arab world and the rest of the world.
I think actually on that note of tolerance, and I do think one of the great things that art does is build bridges and create conditions that allow for tolerance, generosity, love, requited or otherwise, to take place. We should recognize, celebrate, and thank Kiki Smith, Carrie Weems, Jeff Koons, Shahzia Sikander, and Cai Guo-Qiang, 5 remarkable artists who will be honored tomorrow for sharing this evening with us.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Elliot Gerson, Executive Vice President of Policy and Public Programs for the Aspen Institute.
Well, this, I think, is a doubly perilous assignment. First of all, to end that incredible, brilliant exchange, and also to separate all of you from what will be a wonderful reception. But someone had to have this assignment. So I will be brief, but on behalf of the Aspen Institute, the Art and Embassies program of the State Department, the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, and the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center, I'd like to say just a few words, largely of thanks to all of you for joining us here tonight to celebrate the 50th anniversary of this remarkable program. We know that you couldn't help but enjoy Marc Bamuthi Joseph's amazing, exhilarating performance that we saw, and I think all of us will long remember that incredibly insightful dialogue that we all listened to. I mean, just the thrill to have that kind of exuberance of talent together at one time in one place and be able to eavesdrop on it, I think was very, very special. And but we are here to celebrate a wonderful anniversary, the 50th anniversary of this fabulous program, and I've had a chance to see its magic in other cities around the world. In that regard, I'd like to particularly thank Beth Dozoritz, whom it's been my privilege to know and work with for, probably about 15 years, Beth. And more recently, Virginia Shore. We were just in Tokyo recently for a Aspen Institute-sponsored forum on cultural diplomacy. And they've just done an extraordinary job in running this program absolutely brilliantly during a time of obvious challenge for any kind of cultural fundraising, but also deserve special thanks, and Virginia mentioned this, for the insight they had to include contemporary artists from the host countries, in addition to American artists, to foster the kind of cross-cultural dialogue and exchange that we just got a glimpse of. And it's actually that kind of vision that enabled Art and Embassies to play such a significant role in the recent forum that we had in Japan under the theme of the art of peace building and reconciliation. And we did have Virginia there. We also were able to entertain our guests from all around the world in our ambassador's residence, which was complemented so wonderfully by works from this great organization. So it was really very special, and I'm sure for any of you who've had opportunities to see the actual effect of the work in other embassies and missions around the world, it's really remarkable. We had that event in Tokyo after having it in several other places in previous years, including Spain and France, in Oman. And I'm glad to say I think next year we'll actually bring the magic of this kind of cultural diplomacy event to Congo. And if there's a place in the world that needs the magic and power and peace of art, it's certainly Congo. The Aspen Institute, and many of you may not realize this, but when we were founded in 1950, art was very much at our core, art and music and literature. And in the decades since, we've evolved increasingly, at least in outside perception, as an institute focused on public policy and foreign policy, domestic, international policy. And it seems like a small world, but about 7 years ago, largely under the inspiration of the late Sidney Harmon, one of our trustees, we brought art back really to the center stage at the Institute, and not art in terms of performance or display. Sidney always used to say that art is it's not decoration, it's not entertainment, it's fundamental to everything we do and who we are. So in our programs in the arts, what we do is not just show art, give artists a stage or an opportunity to read or perform. We actually engage artists in everything we do, whether it's discussing refugee issues or whether it's discussing education in American public schools, because we believe the perspective of artists is so fundamental and so important. So that is what we do. It's now my privilege to oversee a suite of arts programs, including one run by Damien Ponos, who's here tonight, that deals with cultural diplomacy, but also a spectacular one run by the dancer Damien Wetzel, and we're about to launch one run by the wonderful playwright Anna DeVere Smith. So art is very much part of what we are all about now. Finally, and I did promise you would be able to get to this reception, I'd like to recognize a few people who made all of this possible, other than those, of course, I've already mentioned, Damien Puono, but also Maria Elena Amatangelo and Agnes Pua for their contribution to the planning of this event, Welmed Lanstra for Arts in the Embassies, who helped coordinate the event, and of course the Woodrow Wilson International Center itself, especially Jane, who mentioned that we jealously share her with the Wilson Center. She's also a trustee of the Institute. Sharon McCarter, Marie Stella Gutsoulis for facilitating logistical and outreach efforts, and of course the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center for hosting us. So now it is my pleasure to ask you please join us at our reception. Thank you very much for being here.